Thank you very much. Thank you very much to giving me this opportunity to make this presentation. Hello, everybody. Hello, every participant here. I hope that my presentation will clarify the subject, which relates to Tunisian policy for decarbonization and also national strategy for the implementation of Article 6 to the participant. So I'm going to put my presentation. So I will cover mainly 6 points here, starting with the NDC contribution under Paris Agreement, NDC ambition. NDC was updated in October 2021, and also I will clarify the mitigation potential in Tunisia. As you may know, the NDC objectives are expressed in carbon intensity term from Tunisia. This is the various curve that have been developed in the NDC submission. As you may know, this is the business as usual scenario, considering doing nothing as compared to the current situation. We have also developed NDC unconditional effort curve and the what is called NDC conditional objective. So the objective of the Tunisian NDC is to provide for reducing carbon intensity by 24% as compared to 2010 level. And this 45% would involve conditional and unconditional. Unconditional is defined as national objective that will be achieved through national efforts. So if we convert the objective based on GDP assumption up to year 2030 and converted into ton of CO2 equivalent, we would have an objective of reducing emission by 87 million tons of CO2 equivalent over the whole period 2021-2030. So as I already mentioned, unconditional emission reduction target is a part of the Tunisian domestic policy, so it is not to be integrated into the Article 6. What is considered as a potential Article 6 would be the conditional objective, which would represent somehow 55% of the whole amount of emission reduction as converted into ton of CO2 equivalent. So 55% would represent almost 48 million tons of CO2 equivalent over the period from now to 2030. As you also may know, NDC update mentions that Tunisia is willing to rely on cooperative approaches for all sources of eligible for Article 6 mechanism, which includes renewable energy, energy efficiency, industrial processes, solid waste, and waste management, and also measure potentially targeting agriculture, forest, and land uses. So all the full picture of emission are to be covered by Article 6, especially the conditional part of the NDC objectives. There are no figure mentioned in the NDC of the part of the conditional objective that could or is likely to be part of or developed as a part of Article 6. But the hope of Tunisia is to maximize this amount based on the fact that the financial mechanism or carbon-related financial mechanism are not really in place. So Article 6 would help compensating the scarcity of financing for the moment. So this is a curve clarifying the the future expectation of emission reduction, of conditional emission reduction, that part of it would potentially be met through Article 6 projects. So we see that it is an increasing rhythm from now to 2030, with so the sum would be around 84 million tons of CO2 equivalent as conditional emission reductions. Tunisia has been able to develop a vision towards accessing to Article 6. This is what I'm going to clarify or to explain. A vision Article 6 was prepared and adopted by April 2023 this year, and it is structured around 7 points. First of all, the first point is Tunisia is willing to promote the use of Article 6 by creating project identification and development capacities. Then secondly, adjust the scope and operating method of the Energy Transition Fund. We have actually an operating, what is called Fond de Transition Énergétique, Energy Transition Fund. And Tunisia is willing to adjust the scopes in order to integrate support for Article 6 project for the energy and industrial process sector, and then enable National Energy Conservation Agency, ANME, to play an effective role in developing and implementing Article 6 project and supporting stakeholders to develop Article 6 project. Last point is to create an equivalent of a transition fund, which could be called the carbon transition fund, to the other sector, particularly industrial processes, AFOLU, and waste sector, as to play an equivalent role to Fond de Transition Énergétique. Second point, part of the vision is to implement transparent regulation for emission reduction ownership, which is a very important parameter for stakeholders in Tunisia, but also outside Tunisia. So the general principle that had been suggested is to acknowledge ownership to project proponent, ownership of emission reduction to project proponent. Then also the second point, due to adjustment implication, as you know, the DNA, the Tunisian DNA, will transparently announce the cases of eventual or partial withholding of emission reduction. So the third point would cover the transparent indication of sources and activity which emission reduction might be marketed through Article 6. The list of project activity that are allowed to apply for authorization or approval of transfer under Article 6 will be communicated transparently. Also, programs that are known to be part of unconditional measures are excluded, of course, as they cannot be subject to any adjustment, and then they will be integrated into the national objectives. Also, project with too favorable profitability or low investment constraint will certainly have little chance of passing the additionality hurdle, hence are unlikely to get authorized approved. Last point, unless the funder would agree, a project that receives substantial funding under the convention's mechanism, like a Global Environment Facility or Green Climate Fund, or that access to advantage funding lines are unlikely to get authorized, as the funders will, if they don't agree, then they will be excluded from the to get authorization or approval. So fourth withholding mechanism will also be announced transparently. Withholding level for emission reduction by project type or by sector, energy efficiency, renewable, cogeneration processes, were suggested and duly justified in last April. Final figure will be adopted and communicated as soon as DNA is established. In general, the withholding level are relatively limited because Tunisia is willing to encourage project proponents to recourse to Article 6. So I will also explain where this withholding amount of emission reduction will be utilized. Application entering the Article 6 project cycle, which I will show in a few slides, will pay an initial fixed administrative fee to guarantee serious applications, and also they will pay a limited amount of annual fees. Fifth point of the vision, the withholdings are used in four ways. First, they may be frozen as a provision to guard against the risk of not achieving unconditional targets. Tunisia is really willing very much to achieve its own national targets, as mentioned in the NDC, and this amount of withholdings will guarantee that against any risk of not achieving the unconditional target. Also, if they are going to be used, they would be used to enhance national objectives. Also, the revenue to be recycled in supporting additional activities. So, any amount of emission reductions that are sold abroad as a part of withholdings mechanism, the revenue of this withholding will be recycled to support additional mitigation activity of Tunisia. Also, they would be partly used to support capacity development, adaptation, resilience activities, and also to support vulnerable groups, as well as addressing inequality cases. So all of which are part of the climate change impacts and preoccupation of Tunisia. Point 6, fiscal treatment of AMOUS revenue. There are some recommendations that have been made in last April. Like all programs contributing to energy efficiency and supporting environment preservation, it was recommended that Article 6 transaction be exempted from VAT, especially also because the emission reduction are going to be exported. So it is quite normal that there is no VAT in exporting activities. And also to promote Article 6 project activities, it was recommended to grant a total exemption from income taxes for the first year and activity of any project, and the maximum tax of 10% for subsequent year. This was one of the recommendations made in last April. Last point, promotes the emergence of voluntary market in Tunisia. This doesn't have any link with Article 6, but with only to cover much more in emission enterprises. And Tunisia will promote national compensation market with involvement of and involvement in the international voluntary markets, hopefully, since this will not involve any adjustment. So next point regards governance of Article 6. Tunisia is willing to create a DNA for Article 6. The DNA will involve 15 to 20 main stakeholders, including civil society. It will be somehow similar to the one established during the CDM period, and its role would be to conduct the preliminary assessment of mitigation activity that apply for approval or authorization. Also, DNA will eventually require additional information from the project proponents. It will issue a favorable or unfavorable decision after 2 review rounds as a part of preliminary phase and final decision, and also analyze the eventual appeals and issue an opinion regarding projects that are applied. The unité de gestion par objectif that is represented by Mr. Zmerli, present here, is a part of the, let's say, DNA Secretariat. It will operationalize the procedures of Article 6 It will also prepare and organize the work plan for the DNA. It will transmit the Commission opinions to the public authority responsible for formally taking decision on the project that have been applied. Also, it will manage the Article 6 single windows that is being implemented on the Ministry of the Environment website. It will also verify the admissibility of application, publish the decision formally taken on the website of the Ministry of Environment. It will also monitor the processes initiated by the project, for example, stakeholder consultation, and it will promote Article 6 through communication, capacitation, etc. So it will have a program to promote Article 6 in Tunisia. The Ministry of Environment, as the major stakeholder in the system, will formally take authorization and approval decision. So the Minister of Environment, who is the focal point of climate change and Paris Agreement implication. Following the opinion made by TNA, it will be responsible to sending official letters to project proponent, petitioner. It will establish convention with countries under 6.2, as it has been done with JCM, for example. It will set up and manage a registry, and also it will interact with convention counterpart on all issues related to Article 6.4 and 6.2. Last but not the least, there will also the strong involvement of other sectoral stakeholders, ministries, agencies, employers using civil society. These will be involved in promoting Article 6 in their respective sector. They will also prepare financial intermediaries like Fonds de Transition Énergétique or Fonds Tunisien d'Investissement. They will promote legislating on the tax rule for addressing the emission reduction revenue, and also they will be fully involved in identifying and developing project portfolio. Next point relates to procedure scheme. Very rapidly, this is the procedures that have been suggested in last April. So we have two channels related to Article 6.4 and channel related to Article 6.2. The preliminary phase 1 duration is almost 3 months, and then the second period will also last for 1 month for Article 6.4 and 3 months for Article 6.2. The total duration of the whole process is around 6 months, including all the phases of developing project proposals or preliminary information note, and the what's to call it the ADD, which is activity design document, the equivalent of PDD in CDM terms. So also there are a list of criteria that have been developed to help DNA responding to projects that are being applied. There have been 15 project eligibility criteria that so just I wanted to also recall that there are three types of criteria for the evaluations: project eligibility criteria, sustainable development criteria, and eligibility criteria for project proponents. So regarding the project eligibility criteria, they are used to assess the merit of a project to obtain authorization for the transfer and use of AMOUS under Article 6.2. It will also be up to the project proponent to draw up the arguments that will support its eligibility, first in a first preliminary document called ARN, then to complete it in a dedicated more detailed project description under what is called ADD, based on grid of 15 criteria. So this is an example of criteria. Sorry, they are written in French. For example, contribution to implement CDN, additionality, conservative reference scenario, etc. So these are example of project eligibility criteria. Also, we have 17 sustainable development criteria under 4 family of criteria: environmental criteria, social criteria, economic criteria, and strategic criteria. And there is recommendation on weighing of all these criteria. We have also an example of, for example, criteria for environmental criteria, which will weigh 35% of the whole calculation of the notation. So it includes emission reductions, contribution to using natural resources sustainably, contribution to reducing atmospheric pollution, etc. So these are examples of environmental criteria that will be applied when screening the project application. The last point relates to the eligibility criteria for project proponents. These are used to assess the eligibility of a public-private project proponent that should be a natural or legal person governed by public or private law, including a state body or service, or acting on behalf of it in the context of public service missions. It should have also a legal, technical, and financial capacity to carry out the planned activity, and this will guarantee the success of project, both for the project proponent, but also for the potentially buyer of 6.2 Article 6 projects. It also provides a guarantee to finance the restoration of the sites at the end of the life of the activity of the project. There is also a sworn statement that the project proponent is not bankrupt or subject to any insolvency or compulsory liquidation, that it has not been found guilty of fraud, corruption, linked to a criminal organization, etc., and also that is in compliance with his taxes and social security and obligation. So this is the set of 3 kinds of eligibility criteria with their details that will most probably will be applied during the Article 6 and Article 6.2 and 6.4 processes. So I'm just presenting a very short roadmap for Article 6 in implementation. As you may know, there is many consultation between stakeholders to establish the institutional and organizational framework. Second stage has also started with consultation on tax withholding arrangement, as I explained earlier. A third point in the agenda is developing the portfolio of eligible projects. Fourth point, developing monitoring system, which is a very important condition to implement Article 6 project. And last but not the least, stakeholder engagement and capacity building to allow the emergence of this new Article 6 market. So thank you very much for your attention, and I hope that the presentation was very useful for you. Thanks a lot.